All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Insets and Incentives webinar today. Really glad that you could join us. And the webinar is brought to you by the Sustain Ag Network, which is an effort from our company called AgSpire. And really what we're hoping to do today is provide you some information on some opportunities that exist for farms and ranches, not just in the upper Midwest, but throughout the United States. And really, we felt it was pretty important to try to bring some clarity in what can be kind of a confusing space for operations as we hear terms like carbon programs and environmental outcomes. And I think as we keep moving through these programs and they continue to gain traction and popularity, there's a lot of questions from folks that we talk to out in the country every day. And AgSpire has a very unique perspective on this space, and really from just an experience standpoint, both with grant programs as well as private programs. So what we're really hoping to do today is bring you some information, tell you about some current programs that are available through the Sustain Ag Network that we are managing personally, and then really give you a look into what the future could look like in this space as well. So really, overview of what the program is going to look like today. We'll kind of make an introduction here of all of our presenters. We'll talk about the current landscape of carbon and environmental outcomes, and try to define some buzzwords that you hear really often. Talk a little bit about some incentive and funding opportunities today, and then really tie it all together with what this means for your particular farm and ranch. So would really encourage you as participants, if you have questions, we'll go ahead and you can type those in the chat function, and we'll do our best to get to all of you today. So my name is Ryan Eichler. I'm the Director of Producer Programs for AgSpire. My career, I've spent 20 plus years working directly with farms and ranches, mostly in the upper Midwest, but throughout the United States. So I've got a real passion around land, livestock, and really the people that manage those things. And so as you'll find out with several folks that are involved in the AgSpire business, we're producers ourselves. And so I live in Kingsbury County, South Dakota, about a half an hour west of Brookings, where we have a ranch and a backgrounding operation where we feed cattle, raise all of our own feedstuffs. And then, as you can tell there, I've been blessed with a really great family as well. So really, really glad to be here with you today. Jared?
All right, Jared Knock with AgSpire. So my journey here kind of starts about 11 or 12 years ago, about the same time Justin Fruechte started with Millborn Seeds. We were starting up Dakota Vision Ag back in Carpenter, South Dakota, our local ag retail business that we still own and operate. And we started carrying Millborn Seeds products from that time on. And that was really, 10 to 12 years ago was a big point of transition for a lot of operations where they were first exposed to what is a cover crop, thinking through alternative forages, kind of getting to a level of thinking through grazing management and how do I make my pastures more productive and what can I do for edge of field practices. So we've helped about 150 to 200 local operations in our area with planting their first practices of any of those kinds. About 5 years ago, came in and started working within Millborn Seeds as business development, and that soon kind of morphed into starting and founding AgSpire, and then leading to the programs that we're going to kind of talk through today. So, but I live in between Willow Lake, Carpenter, and Bancroft, South Dakota, so nestled right in the middle of those three big cities. We have cattle, sheep, and hogs. We have kind of diversified crop rotation here in our operation, where we're doing a lot of perennial forages and grass restorations and pasture plantings in our operation as well. So this is my family. I go the opposite way of Ryan. Ryan's got all boys. I've got all girls. So, and it looks like I need an updated picture because there's been a couple of years since that last one. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Jared. And the guy who really needs no introduction, Justin Fruechte.
That's so not
true. You need an updated picture too.
I do. Yeah. Those 4 kids are no longer just 4 kids. We've got 5 now. I had a new baby boy in December, so that's pretty awesome. Family keeps growing. My experience here has been working with forage and cover crop producers over the last 13 years with Millborn Seeds. And obviously now that brand has switched and morphed into Renovo Seed. And it's been a fun transition. Renovo is really just the brand under the umbrella of Millborn that's going to focus more on our dealer distributor sales and retail sales as well. So it's just that more user facing brand than what Millborn was. So same company, same ownership and everything, just a little different look and name. But we live near Pipestone, Minnesota, and we have an operation here too, consisting of some cows, have a cow-calf operation, and grow some feed for them here on our farm, and then raise sheep as well. So yeah, it's been a fun journey as far as the cover crops movement over the last 10 years. And this is probably the, when we tie this with what AgSpire is doing, you're going to see just the next opportunity coming in farming it's phenomenal. It's huge. And so it's an awesome opportunity for producers to be in this space and leading this next movement as far as farming goes, in my mind.
Excellent. Thanks, Justin. So I think we'll just dive right into the main part of the content here, and that is really to give you an overview of what this environmental outcomes marketplace looks like today. And we're really fortunate to have Jared Knock as a resource for this. Jared is probably as familiar with these programs and the landscape of how this has evolved over the years. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jared, and he's going to give you a great look into where we are today and what it might look like into the future. So Jared, take it away.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I'll eventually get to these words here, but start with a little bit even more background. So I like to think those of you that know me or listen to our podcast, I like to think outside of the box a little bit, and I like to think very long term. In fact, I was making the comment the other day that it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to study, right now my oldest daughter is studying the Egyptians and the pyramids building, and it doesn't make much sense to study history 4,000, 5,000 years back if you're not also willing to look that far forward. So if you start thinking through this, I am so abundantly proud to be from a diversified farm and ranch in eastern South Dakota. It hasn't always been easy. The 80s and 90s growing up were extremely tough, but couldn't be prouder and happier to be raising my family here today. And you go, okay, how do we keep this going, right? What does it look like, not just one generation or just for my career, but like 2, 3, or 4 generations from now? So I've always been, for the last 20 years, probably keyed into and trying to figure out what are the risks that agriculture has? What are the risks that we have to being able to pursue this kind of a lifestyle on an ongoing basis? And I used to think that, there was some big pushback from the consumer community around the ethics around animal agriculture or the nutrition around meat consumption. And both of those things we've made an abundant amount of progress on as far as how consumers are approaching the concept of ethically eating meat or the nutritional basis of it. We're making progress big time in those areas. But if I look at the risk factor to what my family does today and how I would love for that to proceed and even get better in the future, it is helping folks understand how and why there is, an absolute need for sustainable livestock production integrated with these crop systems that we want to continue on with as well. So to sort that out, I've been studying for quite a while on what does it mean? What are folks saying when they're talking about sustainability? What do emissions targets and goals mean for those of us in production agriculture? How do we relate to that? How do we navigate throughout that? So 5 years ago, when I started initially at business development at Millborn Seeds, we were saying, okay, it seems to me like most of the major companies that are talking about sustainability and then soon to be regenerative and now resilience within their supply chains are going to involve the seedings that are available through the warehouse here at Millborn Seeds, the warehouses. And what better way to find a population and a group of farms and ranches that are willing to do these kinds of activities than going through the Millborn Seeds customer list and saying, these are the folks that have already adopted. These are the folks that have stuck their neck out there and does these things. They're doing all the things that you're hoping to aspire to within your supply chains. So how do we close that gap? As I look at all of these different labels for activities that you can do on the ground, soil health, regenerative agriculture, holistic grazing, sustainability, they maybe mean a few different things within nuance, but I think the thing that ties them together is the more circular your system is, right? The more regenerative and circular the pattern of flow of nutrients, of energy, of carbon, things like that you have on the land, whether it's through grazing systems or cropping systems, the more regenerative, the more sustainable it is. And that's kind of the thread that ties it all together. So I've spent a lot of time thinking through what are those systems that are highly regenerative in nature. And as we look at it, it really is a diverse use of plants on the ground for the longest period of time possible, incorporated with as many types and seasons of livestock cover as we can as well. That's how we kind of get peak regenerative. So exciting for me, because all the things that I'm really passionate about are all big factors within that type of a system. But how does the biggest challenge that we have, and the biggest, I think, role that AgSpire plays, is being able to translate the things that we know are good for us and good for the land on farms and ranches back with the terminology, the goals, and the outcomes that are desired by companies that have raised their hands. They're buyers of our products, and they're saying, we want to support these systems within our supply chains. So going to go to the next slide. That's where we came into play. About 3.5 years ago, we decided there was a need for a company like AgSpire to be able to bridge that gap. Ever since that process, we've been taking a couple of different approaches on how to do that in the marketplace. But today, we're very fortunate to be able to offer multiple different programs. They all have a common theme. They're all voluntary, completely. They're all incentive-based, meaning that none of them have required practice changes, but only through adoption of practices that have payments associated with them. And they're all connected within the agriculture supply chain. And I'll talk more about that last piece in a little bit. Go ahead. Yeah. So if you look back about 5 years ago, right? So 2018, 2019, this is when I was starting to try and think about there's more to this, and there's a bigger role that agriculture can play. And watershed moment kind of happened in January 2020. And at that point, Microsoft as a company, these pie chart shows different companies that have emissions targets. These are food companies, non-food companies, but most of the major food companies are in here for sure. They have targets they want to achieve from an emissions reduction standpoint. They want to make sure and see that their impact on the environment is lower from a carbon emission standpoint. That involves less use of fossil fuel, but in some situations involves how we use land and things of that nature. In 2020, January 2020, about the time we were kind of getting going, the idea of AgSpire, Microsoft made the announcement that they not only were going to be carbon neutral, meaning that they were going to not have any carbon emissions as an entire company, one of the largest companies in the world. They were going to actually be carbon negative by 2050. And so once companies started to say they wanted to go carbon negative, then the game changed quite a bit, because there's only a few ways to get carbon out of the atmosphere. And you can't just go to solar power to be carbon neutral on everything. You actually have to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. The mechanisms by which we do that today are through solar-powered photosynthesis through plants, right? That's what photosynthesis does, is takes carbon out of the atmosphere. We can do that by creating a very large stainless steel manufacturing facility in the desert that's run by acres and acres of solar panels that takes electricity from the sun, puts it back into this plant, which takes air and sorts out the 0.04% of the atmosphere that is carbon dioxide. Uses energy or a catalyst to convert that from a liquid or from a gaseous to a liquid form, and then pump it 2,000 feet in the ground into a rock formation and cap it and store it forever. That's the other alternative. So we can do it by plants, or we can create an enormous man-made facility that does the same thing as photosynthesis. Those are really the only two main scalable options to take carbon out of the atmosphere. And it was that point that I felt like very strongly that agriculture needs to do its research, put mechanisms together by which we can explain ourselves to the industry to show that truly increased photosynthesis and carbon capture through soil health really is the primary mechanism by which the largest companies in the world and a big consumer base are going to be able to achieve the goals that they've set out. So while I know very few farms that have set out and said, hey, I'm going to be carbon neutral, I'm going to be carbon negative, the reality is that we do have the mechanisms by which and how we manage our land. Much of it has a solid benefit to our production ability itself, to also be able to kind of link that up within supply chains. So as you can see, that was 5 years ago, 2008, 2019. It's ramped up from there. Now almost every single company, Fortune 500 company in the world, has a Scope 3 target for reducing emissions. As we got into this process, we learned more and more about what these things mean and don't mean. And over the last couple of years, we've been able to differentiate between something called an inset and an offset. So it looks like a carbon credit. It's pitched to us as farmers and ranchers as a carbon credit on the surface. But there's a very large distinction in between what might be called an inset and what might be called an offset. So an offset leaves the agriculture sector and goes to mitigate fossil fuel emissions that happen outside of our food products. So it would go to a technology company, it would go to an oil company or an airline that has fossil fuel emissions. They would buy those, use them to offset their calculated emissions, therefore achieving their targets. An inset is different. An inset is actually working with a system that helps to quantify the emissions reductions or removals that you're doing within your operation. And then you're being compensated to share those upstream and downstream with your ultimate consumers. So it's a food company saying, we would like to make the emissions from our beef products look a lot better. And tell that to our consumers and have them feel more confident that when they come to our restaurants or when they come to our stores, that they can feel confident that we're making the beef system better. And when you engage in those kinds of inset opportunities, you're not closing the loop to keeping those carbon credits yourself. They're still a part of your operation. So if you were ever in a regulated environment, or if the state that you live in passed cap and trade carbon tax or something like that, or we have to experience anything like what farmers and I guess ranchers do in Canada, where they have to pay a carbon tax to have access to nitrogen fertilizer. They either have to pay a carbon tax or they have to show that they're doing viable practices on their ground to avoid that carbon tax. If you sell offsets, that now gets carved out of your operation, carved out of your commodity, and goes on to another company. So very likely, if you're in the offset market, carbon market, they're usually very long-term contracts. 10 to 15 years is a lot of what we've seen, especially on rangelands. If you're in that market, you can have an airline that says, we're going to buy rangeland credits from ranchers, and then we're going to use those credits to offset our carbon emissions, by which we can tell everybody that flying is okay because we've offset our emissions. At the same time, we'll also tell you that we won't serve and make a commitment to not serve beef meals on XX airlines, because that would be bad for the environment, despite the fact that many of the carbon credits that allow that company to offset their carbon would have come from grazing lands that produce beef. And this is kind of the ground zero where the kind of the fight is on which path does the farmer ranch take and which way do we want to move forward. I think that there's going to be opportunities for incentives, long term, moderate term, for carbon capture and storage. I think that's a possibility, but I don't think it ever becomes the main play, right? It becomes at best kind of a sideline activity that helps maybe supplement our core income. We're going to need our consumers to keep consuming our products in the same or greater manners in the future for our markets to be viable. So that always needs to be a primary concern. So I have strong thoughts on that. So, but as we've gotten into this and learned about this carbon incentive structure, insets versus offsets becomes a very key piece to understand. The other big thing that I think is taken me, I guess, a little bit to understand is that how can a company that doesn't know exactly whether they're buying from me or not enter into an agreement with me to compensate me or to share, incentivize me to share that carbon outcome? How does a certain beef restaurant that buys hamburgers, sells hamburgers, know exactly that my cattle that I'm actually selling tomorrow at Magnus Livestock in Huron, we're turned 12. So if you're in the market, love to have you there to buy. How do they know? How would McDonald's know that those calves are going to end up at McDonald's? I don't know where they're going to go up. I don't know how they would. So what happens here is a situation is that we would sign a contract, right? So it's a short term, it's a one year contract, but it would say that the things that they're going to help compensate you for, the things that they're going to partner with you on your operation, are something that they can all claim. And you're kind of saying that, hey, I'm not going to turn around this and sell this to XX Airlines at the same time, because that would be double accounting. So those agreements are needed to help the industry understand that they're being able to point to at least the traceability of the outcomes, knowing that they buy beef from this region, knowing that there's a likelihood that that could end up in their plant, and that it's not being counted twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times by different companies. I think that the exciting about, and this is where I'll kind of wrap up here, but the exciting thing about where our vision is within AgSpire and the Sustain Ag Network really is to how do we go about providing premiums, providing incentives for folks that are willing to do the right thing, but do it different than we have in the past. In the past, whether you're a crop farmer or livestock operation, for the most part, if you want to receive a premium, you have to agree to not use a technology, whether it be antibiotics or growth hormone implants or chemistry or genetically modified crop types. The premiums are really about not using a technology. So it's always weighing it out, like, well, I could get a little bit more, I could get an incentive, but I'll have a cost structure to me. And is it worth it? And how will I know until I actually market the product whether that was worth it or not? Our hope is that really there's a lot of maturity and nuance to the conversation now about what is sustainable, what is regenerative, that there's going to be premiums and incentives out there that say it's not so much about what technologies you do and don't do, it's about how many of the positive things you're doing along the way, right? So if the appropriate, occasional use of a herbicide is necessary for you to be able to maximize soil health in your operation, that's okay. We want to reward you for the soil health attributes that you're working through, not necessarily your refusal to use modern technology. So it's kind of a shift forward, and there's some companies that have a track record of saying, hey, we think that we can develop kind of a regenerative product, and maybe we can compete in the organic market because we're approaching the same kind of value system. So I think that's kind of hopefully that gives you a little bit of background on the philosophy of why several of us decided that AgSpire has a need in the marketplace to be able to try and put programs together that fit the philosophy and the mindset that we have. So I think I'll pass it over to Ryan.
You bet. Well, thanks, Jared. I think that that gives everybody a really nice, at least, start to understand the perspective of where these discussions kind of come from, and really how they fit into kind of the day-to-day understanding of what options a producer might have going forward. And I'm sure everybody's got questions, and we'll tackle those at the end. What we really wanted to do next is talk just a little bit about some examples of programs that are available today to growers, and really look at it from a couple different angles. The first couple of programs that we'll talk about are a result of the USDA's Climate Smart Commodities program. AgSpire has been fortunate enough to manage a couple of those programs, as well as serve as technical advisors on several others. And so really, as you take a look through these, what is available, what we hope to do is answer some questions on not just what do the programs entail, but then we're going to let Justin talk a little bit about how to introduce some of the management practices as well. And so the first program that we'll introduce is we've called Covering America from Coast to Coast. And really what this is a specialty seed and oil seed program that will be enrolling farms in South Dakota and surrounding states. And so today, really what we're looking for is 5 crops that are oats, rye, buckwheat, winter camelina, and flax. And the implementation of those crops, along with other conservation practices, will result in a seed contract. And Millborn Seeds will manage that contract, but AgSpire will actually manage the technical assistance. And so with one-on-one help from our technical advisors, we will help you put together an implementation plan that includes cover crop mixes, tillage practices, nutrient management plans, kind of a crop rotation and how these things fit, and then the opportunity to take a look at biochar as a soil amendment. And so really from an overview or a high level, this program is going to incentivize $30 an acre for cover crop establishment, and then offer an additional 10 to 20% premium on the delivery of that seed from those crops through a contract with Millborn Seed. So as far as eligibility goes, as most of our programs launch, these are not long-term contracts. And so it would be a one-year contract in which the incentive payments that are not, incentive payments would be made upon kind of completion and verification by an AgSpire agent. But really, programs and incentives are available to a wide variety of producers. And really what you'll see as a common theme is typically the only time that producers are ineligible is if they're already receiving a cost share from another USDA source. So the most common obviously are EQIP and CSP, or that those same acres could be enrolled in another carbon program already. And so as far as eligibility, we'll kind of help walk you through that. In terms of implementation, the goal there is to adopt a climate smart practices on equivalent acres that are used to grow the grains that are eligible for the seed contract. And so the implementation goals there is you have to plant a multi-species cover crop and then look at 2 of those additional practices that we talked about on the previous slide. As far as verification goes, we'll do some GPS mapping of the operation. But what we really find it important to stress, and that we make very abundantly clear on all the programs that we manage, is we take your data very seriously. And so no individual data will be shared outside of the project. And then the other thing that you'll receive is soil sampling that comes along twice a year. As most of these programs want to soil sample from soil organic carbon or other metrics beginning and end of program. And then the important part is once you complete that verification and we've established that everything was done up to program specifics, you're eligible for that payment. And so we will reward that payment on top of the approved practices that are completed within 45 days of the completion of those practices. And then that premium we'll deliver that then upon delivery of the seed to fulfill that contract as well. Justin, kind of like you to maybe weigh in just a little bit here on making some sense out of how these practices and concurrent crops kind of fit together and what you feel like that could look like.
Perfect. So I guess, yeah, I mean, the first thought that comes to my mind is making sure that if you're signing up for any of these programs, and it's not just these programs, but even if it was an NRCS, EQIP, or CSP program, it's probably not a wise decision for your operation to just do it to sign up for the $30 acre premium, right? Like your cash crop rotation needs to be profitable for the long-term, outlook of your farm. And so we want to make sure that if we're going to incorporate a cover crop into our operation, we're doing it so that it makes economical sense. And so when we talk about adding a cover crop to a rotation, these 3 rotations are probably the 3 most practical and popular rotations that farmers in the upper Midwest use. And actually with these 2 grants that we're going to focus on, they do align really nicely with that. So in this instance, we're going to talk about if you're growing, let's just say oats or rye, because you're enrolled in the Covering America Coast to Coast grant, you're going to sell that for a 10 to 20% premium back to Millborn for seed, which, if you do the math at $6 a bushel for rye, that's going to gain you $1.20 per bushel. Okay. Now we've got that opportunity for that to be harvested in August, and we've got that nice window where we can plant a summer cover crop, and it will benefit your corn crop, right? And so it makes sense. It's not something that we're just adding in and not thinking about it from a profitability standpoint. It does fit well with our operation. So to get into the nitty gritty of what those mixes look like and give you some options, we kind of find 3 different solutions here for this time window. Okay, and each 3 have a bit of a different goal in mind, The producer is one that if you thought that you wanted to graze this cover crop in the fall or into the winter, you'd want to plant this one. It's a nice combination of oats with some brassicas. And if you've ever grazed cover crops before, you understand the importance of maintaining some dry matter in your cow's diet, and that's what the oats will do. We also have a legume and common vetch in that one, as well as some flax. And so if we compare this one to Classic Trio, where Classic Trio is simply radishes, turnips, and rapeseed, that one's great because it's got deep tap roots and it alleviates compaction. But the difference here is the producer will start to build some residue and maintain some cover on your land, whereas the Classic Trio is really going to leave your soil pretty bare throughout the winter and early next spring. It can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. If you're in a high residue system or you're transitioning into no-till for the first time and you want to cycle some of that wheat residue that you just combine, Classic Trio works great. Eastern South Dakota, Western Minnesota, Northwest Iowa. It doesn't work so well if you live in Western South Dakota and you're trying to build residue on your ground and prevent it from wind erosion that fall and spring, okay? Then the third one up there is Nutrient Builder, and that one you would use if you had all intentions to build as much nitrogen credits for your next year's corn crop and really boost your soil biology. It's really diverse, right? So we do put 4 different legumes in there. We've got common vetch, we've got peas, crimson clover, and sun hemp. And then we still have some radishes, some oats, and flax. And so, it's a really diverse cover crop covering all crop types. But really, it's the intentions to not graze it, but build soil biology and nitrogen for next year's corn crop.
Excellent. Thanks, Justin. The next program we'll kind of cover is one that we affectionately call the Grass is Greener program. This was another effort through the USDA Climate Smart Commodity Grants Program, and this will end up being the largest grazing study and concurrent market development opportunity really in the industry's history. And so it's very exciting to be a part of this. Really what it looks like is we're now enrolling cattle producers in South Dakota as well as surrounding states. And I believe it's in year 3, we'll move into a couple different geographies. And so really an opportunity to look at a land use intervention that we'll talk just a little bit more about, but really to look at grazing and seeding plans as a part of the integrated grazing system. And so what we're really looking to do is to improve operational resiliency through this sustainable management. So really what we're looking at from a practice incentive payments here, you've got really 3 options to qualify in land use interventions, and that's a cover crop establishment at $50 an acre, a forage planting at $75 an acre, and a range planting at $100 an acre. And we'll define those for you in just a minute. The way this program works, again, will be a 1-year contract to enroll all of the grazing acres as well as feed production acres on the operation. But what we're really looking to do from a seeding perspective is there'll be cost share available for up to 200 acres per year. Again, the only restrictions there would be on acres that are currently receiving payments under other seed programs or carbon programs on those same seeded acres as well. As far as implementation goes, an AgSpire agent will help you draw up a grazing management plan that has to include 6 months of grazing. And so very traditional grazing system is really what we're looking for. And then, of course, as another part of that implementation is actually making the seeding for a cover crop forage or a range planting. Again, I think what you'll see in most of these programs is there'll be GPS mapping, of which we won't share your individual data outside of that project. And then soil sampling will occur as well on the operation. And then as far as payment goes, once you've completed the seedings, AgSpire will issue an incentive payment. And then the other exciting thing is animals that are part of these operations, cattle that enter the beef supply chain, will also be eligible for additional premiums as well upon marketing. And so you've got a cow herd, you market feeder calves in the fall. If you background those into the spring or finish them yourselves, those cattle will still be eligible for a premium. The only animals that really will not be are anything retained for breeding, replacement heifers, bulls, things of that nature. And so really focusing on the progeny in the calf crop that'll enter the beef supply chain. Justin, maybe you want to talk a little bit through our options here as well.
Yeah, so we'll talk about what we can do for cover crops, what we can do for forage plantings, and then what we can do for the range plantings, because those are the three practices that fall apart through this program. So cover crops here too, we're going to focus on what is the most agronomically best solution in the rotations that we're currently doing. So we're going to first talk about doing a rye planting after corn. And if you've ever done that, you realize how nice that rye works ahead of your soybeans. And that's because of its allelopathic effect against weeds. You know, along with the allelopathic effect, you've got great spring growth that's going to smother any winter annuals. So generally, your soybeans stay cleaner throughout that growing season. Everybody understands the issues with fighting kochia and water-having soybeans. And so we do need other mechanisms to fight weeds in soybeans, and rye is a great one. Okay. Now we just get the opportunity to insert it into a rotation. We're not breaking up our cash crop cycle at all. We're just inserting another forage crop. Take advantage of that and find some funding for it too. And the other one we're going to talk just a little bit on is full season grazing. Full season grazing acres, we saw this in like 2012, 2013, where the cattle cycle also increased and cash crops started to decrease. And if your operation is trying to retain more females, or maybe you're grazing yearlings longer and you're just short on perennial grass, it is an opportunity to put those crop acres into full season grazing forages, and do a lot of good, not only to feed livestock, but there too, we can do a lot for increasing organic matter, water infiltration, which in turn usually benefits your corn crop too. All right, so the rye cover crops, here we really try to promote three different mixes, right? These are multi-species cover crop blends that include about 45 pounds of rye per acre in each of those three. And the difference between them is that Mellow Maker is probably going to be geared more towards a blend that you would like to fall graze. And so we add in radishes, turnips, and rapeseed. You'll graze that in the fall, and then likely you might set back that rye a little bit. Maybe you don't intend it to use it at all for forage that next spring, and then you just plant your soybeans in there that following May, June timeframe. All American comes with radishes, winter camelina, and crimson clover along with the rye. And so it's an opportunity to have another legume in there and a winter annual brassica. And then the winter wonder is just winter camelina with hairy vetch along with the rye. And there too, if you want all wintering species to come back that following spring, any of these, give you the opportunity with a lot of versatility of rye. And that's the best part about rye, and the reason why it's gained popularity so much recently. You can fall graze it, you can spring calve on it, you could take it for a hay or a forage crop. You've got a lot of different ways to go with it, and really Mother Nature will probably tell you which way to go with it. But just know it still fits well with giving you the opportunity to not miss out on the corn and your soybean cash crop rotation there. It also works really well on corn silage acres. So as we talk about making as much forage as possible, chop off your corn silage, plant your cereal rye, harvest your cereal rye in May, and then still plant soybeans that following May, June timeframe. So a really nice fit with cover crops there. All right, so then the other opportunity to make a lot of grazing acres is these season-long forages, season-long cover crops, and Optigraze is the one in the picture there, and this is a combination of forage oats with Italian ryegrass, and then we stick in a lot of hybrid brassicas. And so if you had a window where you could plant really early in the spring, and you wanted to start grazing something mid-June, you'd want to plant Optigraze. It works well if you manage it. So I would plant it on good soil with good fertility. I'd push it from a fertility standpoint, and then I would definitely paddock off your pasture and rotationally graze pretty intensively through this, and you're going to see some pretty good growth potential from this mix. Premium graze and ranch hand are more warm season mixes, so they work in a scenario with maybe you had a winter annual such as rye, or you had a crop that came off early, but you planted this from June to July timeframe, and you wanted as much grazing potential in the summer all the way up into winter, these mixes have some components that will regrow back and give you the opportunity to hit it probably twice throughout that growing season and give you some winter grazing potential as well. But premium graze will give you more grazing. Ranch hand will give you some diversity along with some good quality grazing. And that's probably how you would differentiate between using one or the other. All right, so moving on to forage plantings. And so I guess if we're to compare whether you're going to choose a forage planting or a range planting for this program, obviously there's a price structure difference between how what you're going to receive for a payment on this one. But really the forages, they're more introduced species. Okay, so think hayland planting, alfalfa grass mixes work for this well. But also short-term perennial pasture or overseeding the pasture also works for this. So you would want to choose this if you wanted something that's a little bit easier to establish. You didn't want quite the long-term commitment of native species and wanted something a little bit quicker that way. So the mixes and the solutions that work well in this program, first is Boost, and Boost is simply an overseeding pasture mix consisting of all legumes. So we use red clover, alsike, and ladino clover, and then some creeping root alfalfa and velcada alfalfa in here. Okay, so it's really a cool mixture of perennial legumes. So if you had an opportunity to go out early in the spring, March timeframe, or late in the fall before a snow, and you're going to frost seed your pastures with a blend of legumes, this works awesome for that. And it's going to give you the opportunity to just gain diversity and gain quality. When we think about why this matters from a carbon program, really what you do is you increase the amount of time that something's growing in your pasture. And that's why it works for this program. So it does that for the program, but for your cattle and your livestock, you get better quality grazing, and you start to fix some nitrogen for your grasses. Okay, so it probably decreases the nitrogen application that you typically put on your cool season pastures. The other two blends that work for this program for forages are the Hamilton and the Stockman. The Hamilton, we use this a lot in South Dakota in the James River Valley, where we got pothole country with saline acres. They're kind of wet, and it's just a tough piece of ground where we can't seem to get a good cash crop off of. It's a lot of wheat grasses, some Salinity Max alfalfa. Gives you an opportunity to at least get something growing and to alleviate the problem of those acres of getting any worse. And it will give you at least one hay crop in a season. And then the Stockman is one that we like on good ground, good growing conditions, where you're gonna, put up 3 cuttings of hay, and it's a blend of alfalfa with orchard grass and tall forage fescue. Makes beautiful, palatable hay. Still as high yielding as any straight stand of alfalfa, but because it's a combination of grass alfalfa, we can go ahead and we can tie it into this program, get some funding of it, and because of that cost share, you're going to probably cover most of the cost of your seed of any one of these. So then the last one here that we'll talk about within this program is a range seeding. And if you're a cattle producer and you've got the opportunity to graze virgin prairie, you know that grazing land is phenomenal, right? It's way better than your solid brome or bluegrass pastures from a nutritional standpoint. And so here's an opportunity, like if you had maybe it was a marginal cropland that you're regretting ever farming, and you want to get it back to native prairie, this is an awesome opportunity to do that. And so we're going to promote real diverse mixtures that consist of warm and cool season grasses, flowers, forbs, legumes here. But it's really making sure that when we do this, take the time to do it right, because it is a really long-term solution for those acres. And so I guess that's probably where we come in from a Raynovo standpoint. If you want to go to the next slide, Ryan, we don't have any standard on-the-shelf blends for this, because they really do differ depending on where you're at, your geography, your soil types. But here's just an example of a really diverse blend that we'd come up with, consisting of big blue stem, Indian of their warm season grasses, tall and short warm season and cool season grasses. And then we throw in some things like purple prairie clover, lead plant, vetches, those forbs and legumes. And so this is something that you're going to plant. You're probably not going to be able to use it right away because they're a little bit slower to establish, but they're going to be there forever and get you back to that virgin native prairie like every cow-calf producer loves to graze. So that kind of wraps up the mixes that way.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I think you really provided a good selection of off-the-shelf opportunities and really that discussion around where they fit in common crop rotations. I think will help a lot of folks. And I think the other thing that's worth mentioning as well is through any of these programs, you're going to get the opportunity to work with a technical advisor from AgSpire that is a certified TSP, and so they're going to help you walk through all of these seeding options. The packages or the mixes that we talked about, today are several that are available. But if there's certain desired species that you're looking for in a custom mix, your technical service advisor, he'll sure be able to help you with that as well. And so, Justin, thanks for all the input. I think it makes just a world of sense.
Good, you bet.
To kind of round out the webinar today, the thing that we wanted to talk just a little bit about is where we're looking towards the future. And we're confident that the amount of public funding for these types of programs, as far as that landscape goes, it looks like for the foreseeable future, there'll be a plethora of opportunities. But the changing landscape leads us into working with some private companies or publicly traded companies as well that are looking to make some contribution to farms and ranches for particular outcomes, as Jared mentioned earlier in the slide deck. And so what that side of our business is solely focused on is working with these companies that want to invest and strengthen their agricultural supply chains. And so we're really happy to be launching several programs in the upcoming months, but our first one will really look at a different mechanism for the funding and really different interventions outside of land use. But again, all of these programs that we'll manage are, they will be offering incentives and premiums for these practices. So the very first offering here that we're proud to bring into the marketplace is a phase one of a project we call Ranching for the Future. And the program partners in this are McDonald's, and yes, it is that McDonald's, the OSI Group, which is in their beef supply chain, AgSpire, AgriWeb, which is a ranch management type platform, and then Regrow Ag, which is they help us model the outcomes of these practices. And so where Ranching for the Future differs a little bit from the other two programs that we told you about is this one really focuses on sustainable efficiency, right? Really looking at sustainability or these outcomes from an efficiency standpoint. So taking a look at gains through reduced emissions, and those are as a result of practices like herd management, diet changes, feed additives that are both available today as well as anything that's coming down the pipeline. The feed management, nutrition, and feed additive space is moving very, very quickly as well. So where we're looking today, actually, there's a little misprint in this slide, but we're currently enrolling ranches in South Dakota and Minnesota for phase one of this pilot. And really what we're asking producers to do is to provide some data on what they're doing today, and then identifying which practices that they may be interested in implementing in the future. As a result of that information, then they're going to receive a customized plan based on their operational goals, opportunities, recommendations for improvements, and then timelines. But as part of that report, then you'll also get a look at what funding options could look like in phase two of the program if that comes to fruition. So a very unique opportunity for producers to provide input into and really design future phases of the program. As part of that, there will be a per head premium for participating in the program. And then in addition to that, you'll receive a year-long subscription to AgriWeb's ranch management software. So very unique opportunity. South Dakota and Minnesota. We'd love to visit with any of you who may have some interest in that geography going forward. So a lot of exciting things happening from a programming space, and so glad to be bringing you one that's privately funded. So really to round out, and before we get to the questions and answers, I think what we're really hoping to do here or what we're really hoping to accomplish is to work with you in your operation on a very personal level and really determine if these programs are right for your operation. I think there's a temptation to just go collect a bunch of information, names, phone numbers, emails, and send unsolicited type of material out to participate in these programs. But at AgSpire, we're really committed to getting to know you, your operational goals, both for your business, land, and really your personal goals as well. And really what we're focused on, I think, Justin said it best, is we're really not offering these programs for the incentive and the premium. What we're really looking to do is if both of those payment mechanisms can help you accomplish your goals, grow your business, and really have an impact on the acres that you want to have happen, that's our ultimate goal. And so we really want to keep all of these programs very producer centric, make sure that they work for you and your goals, and that we're just not chasing down premiums and incentives for the sake of chasing down premiums and incentives. So what the mechanism that we're going to use to do that, we're calling the Sustain Ag Network, and it's really our pleasure to bring this to you as producers, because really what we want to do is build this network of folks who want to make these impacts and changes on their land, and understand a little bit about your production, as well as be able to offer that technical advising. I know a lot of you are experts in this field already, have a great jump on a lot of these practices and management strategies, but this team of advisors who can help out to make transition, especially, we feel like that's really important. So in order to join this network, all you really have to do is visit the sustainagnetwork.com. There is a short producer profile there that you can find, very generalized information about where you're located and your geography, so we can match you with programs and those supply sheds. But then just a little basic information about your operation as well, so that when programs come, we can actually match you up with opportunities for the crops you're growing, the livestock you're raising, and things of that nature. So what we shared with you today is a short kind of glimpse into what we're managing, but the other opportunities that will be in the future, we want to be able to tap this network to bring you opportunities as they come about. And so would really encourage you to visit that sustainagnetwork.com, join the Sustain Ag Network, and would be just really excited to work with you and your operation to kind of meet your goals. So that wraps up the slide deck that we've got for today. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up the chat box here to see if there is any questions. Right. Julia, did you have any that had come into your chat box there?
There are a few there, Ryan.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got one here.
Yeah, go.
Technical assistance, who does that? And what kind of technical assistance could we expect? So we would have folks on the AgSpire team and Millborn Seeds as well, given the seed mix planning and things like that, that can help walk through what that looks like. So for example, if you were in Covering America, Derek Fairhouse, who is on the call listening here today, would be the one that helps you kind of walk through that. So he's got almost 20 years of experience in commercial agronomy research. And over the next few years, he's really going to dial in to say, how can we maximize the production and efficiency and optimization for things like oats and flax, buckwheat, rye production, things that we really haven't looked at from a commercial agronomy research for a very long time, because they're not some of our principal, kind of traded cash crops. So we're hoping that over the next few years, we build a data set, we understand better how to and when to fertilize that. We apply the same tools and technology that we can use from a management standpoint to produce really high corn, soybean crops back to these more, traditional grains that just kind of been left behind that way. So it'll look like a a contact point that you'll have to say, if you've got questions, whether it's grazing management and grass is greener, whether it's in production efficiency within the ranching for the future, or within agronomics of these specialty crops and grains and oil seeds, you'll be kind of assigned someone that'll reach out and try and get make sure that they're available to help you out with those things. We will, to kind of answer one of their questions that TJ Farms had there on one of the standards, and we can kind of go through in particular what program you're looking for and what the entirety of it goes through. So I know we've got a few minutes. I want to get to more questions, but the standards that we'll be using are NRCS standards, basically for simplicity reasons, right? So if we're going to do a cover crop, it's going to meet NRCS standards, which we're going to use their seed calculator. We're going to use their planting dates, planting depth, and things like that. So those are the standards primarily when it comes to land use that we're going to use, the ones that NRCS has set out for the stipulations on that, which, for the most part, those seeding calculators are generally okay and pretty close. If anything, we usually put out more seed than what they require, especially with perennials. But yeah, they're pretty workable to work with.
Hey, Jared, from your perspective on your interaction with some of the companies that are looking to privately fund some of these programs, what are they looking at, do you think, from an outcomes, or what are their goals and really their desire to get right down with the farms and the ranches to participate?
Yeah, well, I think we have I kind of mentioned in one slide, with the mass balance approach, we have a largely untraceable food system, but yet some of the largest companies in the US and in the world are food companies that have tremendous brands, and they really want to pull forward the connection that they can make with anybody in their supply chain. So they're very eager to try and figure out how they can connect. So there's 550,000 beef producers in the US with an average herd size of 44 head. That's a very disaggregated supply chain. They know that there would have to be tremendous consolidation in order for that to be a fully traceable system. That's not what they're looking for. So instead of trying to reevaluate the system, as has happened in other, supply chains and commodities, are saying, let's find a more creative mechanism by which we can connect directly with the folks that are in the supply chain doing the positive things. So there's a very, very goodwill earnest. And when we have these conversations about, insets versus offsets and those things, these food companies are 100% in the same board. Let's make sure that we can continue to promote and highlight, whether it's beef or oats or whatever the commodity is, to our consumers. Let's tell the story. Let's get data behind it that brings value into the parent company, and close the loop and make sure that everyone's rewarded along the way.
Very good. Julia, did you have one that kind of come in maybe about data?
Yes, I had one more come through, and they wanted to know what kind of information will be gathered and how is it used?
Excellent. Jared, you want to tackle that one?
Sure. So depending on the program, there's a different amount of data captured. So if you're looking to sign up for some of the programs that we have that utilize federal funding as well, it's going to look a lot like your sign up at the NRCS office when it comes to the questions being asked, a little bit about the dynamics and demographics of your operation. You're going to have to turn in a seed plan and a seed rate, mixing rate, and a planting date for a cover crop planting and things like that. But if you've ever done anything experience-wise with the NRCS office, it'll be a streamlined version of what you've already been through. So then some of the other efficiency stuff, we're going to ask a lot of data about your operation. We're going to be able to use that to be able to kind of try to find incentives for what you're doing. But then after that, it stays sealed within our system, and it doesn't get passed on in any individual format. So aggregate numbers, 50 producers at a time, 25 producers at a time in a geography might get put into a snapshot look of what this region or what this state looks like. But anything that's individualized won't be shared anywhere from there. One point about the double accounting for per acre and practices. If you are in CSP or you are in QIP, you're still eligible to be in many of these programs. It just might look a little bit different, right? So instead of paying you a per acre incentive for your cover crop, that you're planting, we could do additional acres on top of EQIP or CSP, but you still might be eligible for the market premiums that we're offering. So if you are in programs, and we highly encourage that, and one of the net benefits of being in an AgSpire program is that our technical assistants and landowner advisors will be helping you to say, in addition to the reseeding effort that you're doing, here's the next step. Here's some fencing and water development and things like that are available from EQIP, and we want to help you understand when those sign-up dates are and what you might be wanting to ask for. So we view them as being very synergistic and supportive.
Yeah, that's a great clarification, Jared, and I can't stress enough the ability to work hand in hand with producers and really understand those operational goals and what the future looks like for the operation. We're really at just the tip of the spear in terms of programming, and so really we foresee a fair amount more of these opportunities as the years progress. And so I think it's important to understand that with your AgSpire technical advisors, there will be a tremendous amount of experience that comes along with that, and the opportunity to kind of learn and grow together as well. Guys, I don't really see any other questions. I'd like to, on behalf of AgSpire and the Sustain Ag Network team, I'd like to thank you guys for joining us today. Really exciting opportunities in a space that we do understand that there's a lot of questions, and we really look forward to serving you and your families, your farms, your ranches, and we couldn't be more excited to get started on these projects with you today. So again, I would remind you, visit the sustainagnetwork.com, sign up for the Sustain Ag Network, and one of our advisors will get a hold of you, and we can start exploring opportunities that exist today. So on behalf of the entire team here, we'd like to say thanks for joining, and we look forward to hearing from you in the very near future.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you guys.